Malaysia. Good morning to all of you. Good morning to you and Shabbat Shalom. This is our Sabbath. And on the Sabbath day, the Holy One did something marvelous and beautiful that we all get to share in every 7 days. He blessed the seventh day. He blessed it. He spoke over it something that we'll hopefully talk more about today before the day's over. He did something to it that infused it with energy, infused it with goodness, infused it with his own personality. He blessed it. And he did something else. The second phase of what he did was he made it holy. He built holiness into it. He took like a potter or a carpenter, an artisan, and he began to craft into this seventh day, and what we rehearse, what we repeat every 7 days thereafter. He built into it a powerful network, a release mechanism, a channel of his own divine holiness. What fills the holy temple, what fills the throne room and the courts of the Holy One, the pulsing energy and joy and hope and shalom that are there. So that's when we celebrate the Sabbath. We remember the Sabbath, we commemorate it, we relive it every 7 days so that we can get that infusion, both of the blessing which carries his own unique personality and who he is, his persona, his attributes, and that we can receive the energy and empowerment, the ways of dealing with life that he infused and desired for us to have. So good Sabbath to you. Shabbat Shalom. I'm hoping that I'll be able to visit with you for a while today, because I understand that the internet is having its challenges, as it does from time to time. I pray that we'll be able to speak for a while. If we're not, then shalom to you. May your day be blessed. But let's go on as if you'll be able to speak with me for a while. And we will talk about this wonderful thing called the Torah. We do not interpret the Bible or the Torah or the prophets or anything else in light of today's events. Events that we hear about on the news or read about in paper or online, those are not the key to interpreting the Bible. The Bible is the key to interpreting all things. So we don't interpret current events, the Bible through current events. We interpret the Bible, we interpret current events through the Bible. I'll make that clear. We interpret and review and view and perceive current events through the lens of the Torah. And the Holy One has given us this gift of a weekly Torah portion so that we can find specific parts of the Torah that we can relate current events to and view current events through. And this week, the Parsha, the section of the Torah that we do this with, is Parsha Naso. It's the 35th of the 54 divisions of the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible as most people know them. And this Parsha Naso, the 35th Parsha, fits into a moment in time in the history of the people of Israel, the covenant nation, and which it still at this time is with the mixed multitude that came out of Egypt. And so we have this great representation of all nations present at Mount Sinai, and we are about ready, after 11 months of dwelling in this historical thing that we recount and we relive every year. We are about ready to depart Mount Sinai. The Holy One has determined that we have spent long enough round about this mountain. He does not intend for us to stay secluded. He does not intend for our mission on earth to be accomplished in some sort of a monastic convent where we're protected from all the things of the world and separated from them. No, he intends to send us back into the dark places of the earth with the light that he has given us to carry. We are to be the light to the nations, and we can't do that sitting in the desert, secluded and remote at Mount Sinai. And so he's determined we have compassed this mountain about long enough. And so next week, as we go through this cycle of events, next week in Parsha Be'alotka, the next section of Torah that we'll read, we will actually see the departure of Bnei Israel and the mixed multitude from Sinai, and we will see them going into the deserts and then into the nations of the world. We will begin to have our impact for good, for harm. Whatever the Holy One allows us to do, and we in our flesh and our spirit and our mind receive and function in, if we follow His will, if we follow His words and His instructions, we will have a powerful, good impact upon the world. But if we do not, if we choose to follow our own way, our own pseudo-intellectual ideas, our concepts, our abstractions, we follow our flesh and our appetites and our urges, our revulsions, our sense of repulsion at what we see in the world, then we will have a very limited, if not a very negative impact. It's all up to us. We have choices to make. So we're here at Parsha Naso. Now, if you could imagine that you were a parent of a young growing child, not a baby, but one who was ready to step out for their first trip out into the world, and they were going to experience some things. You knew they were going to experience some things in the world that they hadn't really ever faced before, not in the context in which hopefully you had a nurturing and a caring home that was focused and based upon the kingdom of heaven, was based upon the presence of the Holy One and communication, communion with Him at all times, that the light of His countenance was upon you at all times. If this was the environment in your home, now you're going to send your children, imagine, out into the world, and they're going to have to face hardships, and they're going to have to face difficulties and challenges to their flesh, and voyeuristic ideas to their mind and their pseudo-intellect. And you want them prepared. Don't want them to go out unprepared. Just good luck. I hope you do well out there. No, you want to spend some time with them. You want to gently, over a course of time, begin to release information and wisdom into them that will center them, give them a good center of gravity, give them a base, a foundational base upon which they can focus on their lives, and tools with which they can deal with the challenges and the problems that they're going to face out there. You don't want them to go unprepared. You don't want them to go unequipped. You don't want them to go ignorant, just blindly stepping off into the trapdoors that the world has to offer to people, or get caught up in the dramas or the traumas or the injustices or the movements or the ideals of this world. You want them to be able to stay grounded. You want them to be able to stay above the fray, and yet is part of the world, in which such that they can bring light into the world. And so you prepare them. You begin to have conversations with them, and among those conversations involve telling them what are the danger zones, what will cause them to be an epic fail, what not to do whenever the time comes. And if you do something or you see something that's not focusing right, how you handle it, how you process it, how you work with it. Well, welcome to Parsha Naso. I've talked as if we were talking about us and our children. It's the Holy One. It's the Creator of the universe. It's the Father in heaven. It is He who desires to see His children succeed in life, not fail. So He is now spending a little time before He sends us off into the wilderness, into the deserts, into the world, into the nations. Before He sends us out into that, He's taking some time to give us some last-minute instructions, and to not only give us instructions as to how we are to hold ourselves together, but how we're not to fall apart, and how we're not to get engaged and caught up in the things of the world. And so this is our Parsha Naso. The words mean lift up the heads. Naso et rosh. Lift up the heads, and that's the first phrase of the section. So let me kind of tell you, it's Numbers 4:21 through 7:89. It's the longest actual Parsha in Torah, but there's a reason for that. That's chapter 7. It's 89 verses, and that has a lot to do with things. And so this is the Parsha we'll be reading, and I call this a question, like the Holy One would ask you, or I would ask my children if I was going to send them out in the world. Here's the question. Are your heart and your hearth, that which makes you up your home and who you are your heart and your hearth prepared for the challenges that loom on the approaching horizon? Are your heart and is your hearth prepared for the challenges that loom on the approaching horizon? I hope you're feeling this is not just about recounting the history of Bnei Israel. This question is for you today. And considering what's facing us, what is going to go on in our world, in our time, in our generation, what is coming, what enemies we will face, what challenges we will deal with, what lack, what hunger, what thirst, what frustrations we will have to deal with in the coming days as the time gets tough. Then how are you prepared? Are your heart and your hearth prepared for the challenges that loom on the approaching horizon? It is a legitimate question that all of us should be asking. Now, I want to talk to you about the covenant calendar, where we are. The reason this is so important and such good timing is that we are at a certain, so we have experienced the glory of Shavuot as it's called in the Hebrew, and the idea is that we have now received both the words, the living words that are infused with holiness from the King's throne room, into earth, into ourselves. We have heard his words from Mount Sinai, and also we have recounted the story of the release of the fullness of the Ruach HaKodesh, this breath, the very indwelling Spirit of God. We have both of those fresh in our minds and hopefully fresh, enlivening our beings and our spirits. We've had that, but now we have the challenge. Just as Yeshua was sent out in the wilderness, immediately by the Holy Spirit after the great sequence of events at the mikvah at the Jordan River, where the voice of heaven opened up and the sounds of the words of the Holy One was spoken into the hearing of the universe and the hearing of people. After that happened, he was sent into the wilderness to be tested. Well, so it is with us. So we're at that stage where we're about to be tested. And if you look ahead to the next moed, or the next special event on the divine calendar, not the world's calendar, forget those events. No telling what they're going to put on you in the next few weeks. But here's what comes up on the kingdom calendar. In the calendar of the people of the Holy One, by the history of all the Torah, the prophets, and the writings that we know about, here's what's coming up. The 3 weeks between the straits will be the next thing. This is the time when the enemies prevail. This is the time when the enemies attack and they begin to wear down our defenses and take our children and our weak ones captive and begin to destroy everything that's holy and everything that's precious. The 3 weeks between the straits are coming for us, coming to us. Now, the dire straits, the time of dire straits, that is looming on your horizon. It is on the world's horizon today, as well as it was for the people of Israel in ancient BC. Now, here's the thing. So this is coming, and so we have to prepare ourselves. This is going to be tense up in here. It's going to be tight up in here, as we said last week. And so now are we prepared with heart and hearth to be able to handle it? Now, the question will become, as we enter the desert, as we enter the wilderness, as we enter the desolate places, as we enter the times of tribulation and difficulty that loom before us now, and there's nothing that can be done about it, quite frankly, the question is not, will we have to experience these things? The question is, will we leave the desert, the wilderness, the desolate places, the tribulation better for us being there? Will we leave it better than we found it, or will we leave it worse for wear? And will we leave each other worse for wear in the process? What kind of impact will we have? Are we prepared to leave a kingdom impact in the world and the desert and the wilderness, and even the ones who are the enemies who are trying to destroy everything that's holy and good about life? Or are we going to leave a good impact, or are we going to make it worse than it already is by virtue of repeating what they do back at them? Repaying evil for evil, repaying insult for insult, repaying anger for anger, wrath for wrath, violence and vengeance for violence and vengeance. Are we going to do that, or are we going to follow the kingdom protocols? Or do we even know what the challenges will be? Well, the Parsha Naso means to lift up, to carry, to bear forth. Naso, to lift up, to carry, to bear forth. What would happen if our faces, if our heads, if our spirits were lifted up and being carried by the Holy One, being carried forth by this great movement of his Kedusha energy and his beauty and his majesty and his shalom? What if we got carried up by that as opposed to carried up by the adversarial things that are going on in the world, by the enmity that is being spread, by the division that's being fostered, that's being promoted by politicians and governments and movements? That the division based on ethnicity, division based upon ideology, division based upon culture, division based upon skin pigmentation, just division based on wealth, division based on gender. Well, these are what the world is trying to divide us by and to destroy us. They begin to deconstruct us as who we are. We are one new man. We are Adam Echad. We are one new man, and the world is trying to destroy us. These are the enemies. These are the time between the straits that's coming. So the first key is to understand that we have a mission upon the earth. We are loved. We have been chosen. We have been divinely set apart for a great mission. It is an honor. It is a privilege. We have been redeemed from the world's bondage. Therefore, we should not repeat the ways of the world's bondage. We have been redeemed from hate, and we should not repeat hate. We have been redeemed from anger and paranoia and fear and terror as we're all over Egypt, and we should not be repeating those things in the world where we go. So our challenge is to take our bloodline assignment, our assignment as mission of the grand redemptive plan of the Creator of the universe. He plans to redeem all of mankind as a species, bloodline by bloodline, household by household, individual by individual. As many as will come, as many as will receive it. There is no one beyond His reach. Also, He intends to restore the physical creation, the world in which we live, to its original intended state of beauty and fruitfulness and shalom, like Eden, where it was harmoniously interacting and producing beautiful things. That's what He intends to do. Are we on board with that mission? Are we caught up in that? And are we ready to do the necessary things, the practical actions, the disciplines, as well as the mitzvot, the instructions that He gives us to be able to bring that to pass in the earth? This is the parsha I call of defining the baseline. Defining the baseline. Now, a baseline or a benchmark, you could call it a benchmark. But here's what a baseline or a benchmark, most of you know this, but is a starting point. It's a point of reference that is used for comparisons or progress evaluations. In other words, if you want to know how much progress you've made or the opposite, you have to compare where you are and where you've been with the baseline. What was the expected? What was the beginning point? The baseline or benchmark is a starting point or point of reference used for comparisons and or progress evaluations. It is something or some level of health and wellness and performance that has been set up by the one who has the ability to set these things up as an example or as the minimum standard, as it were, against which others will be judged or we will be judged in future years. How are we doing in relation to the baseline, in relation to the benchmark? How is the nation faring in relation to the baseline, in relation to the benchmark? How is the world around us handling us and dealing with us based upon the baseline or the benchmark? It is basically, I guess you would say, a baseline or a benchmark would be a norm or a minimum expectation state. So now that we understand this is the week that the Holy One is going to set the baseline and the benchmark. The camp of the redeemed has been rearranged, and that is the rearrangement is part of this whole setting the baseline. We are being rearranged so that we can march our way to our destiny and to the engagement with the adversaries and with the people who are waiting to hear our messages. The great march to our destiny is coming, and we have been rearranged for that purpose. A baseline is being set. He has given us a certain set of numbers. We are to understand that we should not be losing people. We should be gaining people. We are not in this world to lose people. We're in this world to gain people. So the baseline has been set numerically. But that's not the only way by any stretch of imagination. That's not even the primary baseline. The baseline is more spiritual. It is more cultural. It's more engaging in how we're going to affect the world. But we're supposed to build upon what He's given us, the baseline He has established for us. Now, we have responsibilities to fulfill in the world. We have an agenda, a mission. We have been given all the tools that we need. This is our baseline operation. Every tribe, every clan, every father's house, and every individual of whatever bloodline and whatever mixture. Remember, we're in the mixed multitude time when there is all the nations of the world are represented by our body. Now, all of these right now, the baseline is that we're all on board. We're all on board with the role that we have been assigned to play in the Holy One's grand plan for redemption of mankind and for restoration of creation. Now, from here, where will we go? This is the baseline. We'll tell you about what that baseline consists of in a few seconds. But now that we've got the baseline, are we going to go up and be higher and be better and improve upon that baseline, or are we going to go down? As Billy Joel sang in regard to Good Night Saigon, he says, and we will all go down together. Well, I hope we'll not go down together. I pray that we will go up together, above the baseline. Well, the baseline is Sinai, B'nai Israel, and the mixed multitude at Sinai, 1 through 14 of Nisan, in the year following our betrothal, the Sinai experience, where we received the Torah. That is our national baseline. How we were then is the baseline or benchmark. Now, that the baseline is defined not just in numbers, it's defined by how conscious we are of the presence and the attributes of the Holy One, our God. If we lose that baseline, if we drop down below the level of consciousness of who the Holy One is and what His nature is and what His purposes are, then we will begin to drop. We will all go down together. Our consciousness presence, our presence consciousness, is a critical factor of the baseline. At Sinai and 1 through 14 Nisan of the year after the giving of the Torah, we were one. We were continually aware. The tabernacle was the center point of our camp, and everything evolved around our interactions with Him at that tabernacle. We lived life, we did family life, we did other life, but the primary focus of our life was consciousness of the presence of the Holy One. We were hosting royalty. We were hosting His presence and His character and His attributes. We were the representation of that. So that consciousness. Second part of the baseline was a Shema focus. We were responsive to every word He spoke. He told us the key to survival is that every man should not live by bread alone, or the things of this world, the material things, or the things that are around us, but instead every man is to live by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. This Shema responsiveness. So if we ever cease being responsive to what His words say and to the sound of His voice, then we begin to deteriorate, deconstruct, and we begin to have lesser or destructive impact upon the world around us. So presence consciousness and Shema focus and responsiveness to His words. The third thing is a Shema approach, an approach of cherishing and treasuring the covenant and the purpose to which we're called and the reason for which He set us alive on earth. More so than all the things the world might offer us, more so than all the things in relationships that we desire, and the sense of well-being that our natural flesh craves. That is less important than the Shema approach to life, setting kingdom priorities based upon what He says is worthy, what He says is worthwhile, what He says is important. And then there is the idea of functionality and productivity. At Mount Sinai 1 through 14 Nisan, how productive we were so fruitful. We were producing joy, peace, love. We were producing the fruit of the Spirit. There was no conflict. There was no argumentation. There was no selfishness. It was like heaven on earth at that time, because our focus was upon the Holy One, not upon our differences, not upon our nationalities, not upon our ethnicities, not upon any of our backgrounds or our different family approaches or our cultural ideas. We were based upon one thing: the kingdom of heaven is here. And the kingdom of heaven is here, and we are called to be bringing it, promoting it, exporting it. So, productivity and functionality. We begin to all learn. We all have a function. We all have a role to play. We fit into a greater plan of bringing the kingdom of heaven to the earth, bringing the light to the nations, the light to the world. That's more important than getting what we want or getting people to do what we think they should do, making governments do what we think they should do, making courts say what they say. No, the key factor is bringing the kingdom bit by bit, step by step, march by march, desert by desert, Bamidbar by Bamidbar, wilderness by wilderness into the earth. And then their baseline was at Shalom. We were We were at shalom. We were at peace. We were at a sense of well-being and wellness. We felt nothing was going to destroy the plan of God. We had total emunah, faith that His will was going to be done in the world, in us and through us in the world. It was internal shalom. It was well with our souls. So today, as we're talking about this baseline, where are you in relation to the baseline of shalom? Is it well with your soul? Are you frustrated? Are you angry? Are you fearful? Are you worried? Are you terrified? Are you paranoid? Or are you sulking? Are you enraged? Are you tense and nervous and worried about the future? So this is you're under the baseline. You've fallen under the baseline of 1 through 14 Nisan, the first month of the biblical year, in the year following the giving of the Torah. So the internal shalom, but it's more than internal shalom. It's tribe unto tribe shalom. The tribes were not competing with one another. The tribes were not, and we could go with all movements, and we could go with ideologies as well as tribes. Any natural division, ethnicity, we could go with culture, with gender, with age. Any of these differences were not jealous and promoting themselves. They were all tied and surrendered to the mission, to the king, and to his kingdom going forward. Same with clan to clan. There was shalom from clan to clan within each tribe. There was shalom within each patriarchal and matriarchal chain, bloodline chain within the clans. There was shalom within each and every family, fathers and mothers, husbands and wives, children and parents and children and grandchildren. They were at shalom with one another. They sensed their reason to be. They had a sense of purpose that went further, more important to them, highly prioritized over their own selfish agendas and needs or feelings. And then they were also at that time, before they left Sinai, 1 through 14 Nisan, in that year, they were at peace with the nations. We hated no nation. We feared no nation. We feared no kingdom, no government. We feared no one world order or 20 world order. We didn't fear that. We understood the kingdom of heaven will prevail. We were not so caught up with the day-to-day news and details of that. It would happen, but we were not there. The baseline is that we should not be fearful of those things. So, the defining the baseline for each one of us and the benchmark for each one of us means that every individual should be, as they were at Mount Sinai, every individual should be conscious of and grateful for what I call the grand trilogy of mercies and blessings that the Holy One has poured out for us. As He had poured out these blessings over the people at Mount Sinai after their release from Egypt, as He had been pouring out this trilogy of mercies and blessings over them, so He has done so over us. The first mercy and blessing of the grand trilogy is He has given us a stunning, undeserved deliverance from bondage, from the bondage to this world and to its ways and its modes and its governments. The stunning, undeserved deliverance. Are you grateful for that? Are you conscious of it? Do you know you are not like that anymore? You don't have to be that way. You don't have to be like the world or its institutions or its governments or its educational systems tell you you're supposed to be. You don't have to be like its science, its world of scientists, as they call themselves, tell you, or any of the other realms or spheres in which they try to tell you who you should be or what you have to do. No, you have been stunningly, undeservedly delivered from that bondage, and you are free to be who the Creator of the universe has told you and called you to be, and to do what He's called you to do. You are free. That is the first of the trilogy of mercies and blessings. The second one is you have received a stunning and undeserved invitation from the Creator of the universe to not enter and frequent and be healed in and absorb Kedusha energy from, and then to get personal training for, and then serve as courtiers in the King's chambers. The King being the King, the Creator of the universe, the Holy One. We have the ability to move into and out of the beauty realm of our God. That is an undeserved, stunning invitation. That is one of the mercies and blessings. We should not be unaware of that right, that ability. We should not be take it for granted. We should be humbly grateful for that privilege. Shabbat being one of those, Sabbath being one of those opportunities when we have the ability to step into the holy of the beauty realm and touch his beauty, touch his majesty, touch his goodness, touch his healing power, and be refreshed and renewed and restored. We have that invitation. What a blessing, what a gift. Invitation of the trilogy of mercies. The third of the trilogy of mercies and blessings that we have as our baseline is we have a stunning, undeserved appointment as royal ambassadors. We are seen by the Holy One and called by the Holy One to be people of great gravitas, people of great influence, people of life and health and peace that can offer solutions and hope and light to the world. That we are stunningly, undeservedly appointed as royal ambassadors of the Creator of the universe to all peoples, to all ethnicities, to all movements, to all ideologies, to all cultures, to all economic classes, to all genders, to all families and geographical regions of the earth. These are the grand trilogy of blessings and mercies. Are you aware of those? Are you conscious of them? Are you grateful for them? Does that color the way you approach the world? Or does the world's news and the toxicity of interactions with people in the marketplace or even in your own home that you disagree with, is that bothering you? Which one is governing in your life? What's your baseline? I hope the baseline is a consciousness of and humble, great gratitude for these trilogy of mercies and blessings. Now, I'm going to go further and define the baseline as it was on Mount Sinai 1 through 14 Nisan of the year after the giving of the Torah. There was no selfishness. Is there in you now? There was no internal strife inside the individual. There was no wondering who you are or why you're here, or feeling slighted in any way, or getting less than you deserve. There was none of that. There was no dissension within the ranks of the people. There was no envy. There was no jealousy. This is the baseline. This is where we start. Now we're going to see these are going to be challenged. Every part of this baseline will be challenged by our interaction with the world. Selfishness will be challenged. Internal strife will be focused, which will be a possibility. Dissension within the ranks will be actually promoted by many people. Envy, there was no envy at that time. There was no jealousy. There was no covetousness at that time. All those will be triggered by things that we're going to see in the wilderness. Children, as I would say to my own kids, God, the Holy One would say to you, my children, you will be challenged at all these levels of your baseline, but do not surrender to envy, to jealousy, to covetousness, to selfishness, to internal strife, to dissension in the ranks. There was also at Sinai at that time no offense, no malice, no hate. Look into your own heart, dear one, my dear children. Is there, before you leave Sinai, before you step off into the tribulation, the times of the time of the 3 weeks between the straits, the attacks of the enemies, is there an offense in you? Are you offended? Are you angry? Do you have malice toward any individual or any group in this world? Do you hold hate? Do you indulge hate in your heart or in your life? Is there fear? Because that fear, there was no fear at the baseline. Are you worried and anxious and afraid based on what you're seeing around you? I'm challenging you, dear one, because the Torah is what it does. It challenges you at this time of the year. Get back to the baseline, if nothing else. Hopefully you've already moved beyond the baseline, but at least get back to the baseline. No offense. Allow no offense in you. Be offended at no one for nothing. Allow no malice in your heart or in your mind. Allow no persons around you to speak in malice that will in any way affect you or cause you to be caught up in it. Allow no hate. Allow no fear. The other aspect of the baseline at Mount Sinai was there was no curiosity about the ways of the world. We didn't care what the rest of the world was doing. We didn't care what was happening in the celebrities' homes. We didn't care what was happening on the basketball courts if they had them, or whatever sports operations, or whatever entertainment venues. We didn't care. We didn't care what was going on in the economic forums. We didn't care what was going on in the world's systems of government. That was not our job. That was not our focus. That was not our jurisdiction. We were given a mission, and that mission had more to do with carrying the presence and the light and the hope and the shalom of God into the world. So no curiosity about the ways of the world. How are you doing? Are you curious about the ways of the world, its entertainment systems? Do you tune into those things? Do you listen to the news about that? Are you hanging on? Do you read the magazines? How about there was also at Mount Sinai, there was no lusting after the mammon of the world, over the things that the world is crazy about. We were not crazy about money. Love of money was not part of us. The hunger for houses and boats and yachts and fancy cars and 401k savings plans was not part of what was driving us. We were driven by mission, by the purpose. That's the baseline. How are you doing in regard to the baseline? At the Mount Sinai in the baseline years, there was neither irreverence, nor complaining, nor ingratitude. No irreverence, no complaining, no ingratitude. These are the hallmark of our world today. All around you, this is what you see: irreverence, complaining, ingratitude. But see, that's below our baseline. Don't let yourself sink below the baseline or the benchmark. Also at Mount Sinai at that time, 1 through 14, Nisan in that year, love for God, for family, and for nation, for fellow man was neither feigned nor forsaken, nor had it grown cold. It was passionate, it was fiery. Love for God, love for family, love for the nation that we're called to be part of, and love for our fellow man, even our enemies, was not feigned. It was not forsaken. It was not faked. It had not grown cold. How are we doing on that? How's your love quotient today? There was also no class warfare incitement going on. There was no gender blaming going on. There was no race baiting going on. There was no culture canceling going on. There was no virtue signaling going on. There was no dehumanizing and no application of derogatory or profane labels to anyone. That's below our baseline. That's below the benchmark. That is unacceptable for the kingdom of heaven. Also at Mount Sinai, the baseline included there was no cynicism, there was no sarcasm. Cynicism will always breed cynicism. Sarcasm will always breed more sarcasm. Do you understand why it's toxic? Why it's below our baseline? Even though it sounds cute and we sort of make fun of it, we think it's not serious. It is, because sarcasm will always engender more sarcasm. It will always reap what it sows, and cynicism is the same way. Same with profanity. There's no cute little sayings in the profane world. All they do is generate more profanity and spread the profanity around and make it worse. It has the law of escalation. It keeps escalating until it gets more and more profane. Do you see it happening? This is what happened. At the baseline, there was no cynicism, and that should not be now. There was no sarcasm, and it should not be now. There was no profanity spoken, and it should not be now. There was no lashon hara, no negative speech about other human beings or about certain situations or circumstances. There was no lashon hara. There was no using the tongue for anything besides what the Creator of the universe told us to use it for, which is to bless, to encourage, to exhort, to inspire. Also at the baseline at Mount Sinai in 1 through 14 Nisan, there was no inferiority or superiority complexes being spread around. There was no grudges being held. There was no unforgiveness in the heart. There was no victim mentality about how bad we've been treated by other people. We had been treated bad by other people. Didn't matter. The King had resolved that in our heart, was resolving it day by day in our hearts. We were being healed, not nursing grudges and wounds and scars. At the baseline, there was no judgmentalism. There was no discrimination. I'm going to look around for somebody to judge. Somebody's doing something wrong. Someone doing something dirty. Decent folks can frown on, as Chris Christopherson said once. There was no judgmentalism. There was no vigilantism. There was no vengeance seeking. Vengeance is reserved for the Holy One. He knows what to take care of it. He will do it properly without inflicting unnecessary damage. You see, we're not supposed to do that. The baseline is not to involve those things. Okay, so you've seen the baseline. Now it comes down to this: behold, how good and how pleasant it is for brothers to dwell together in unity. Gam yachad. Behold how good and how pleasant it is for brothers to dwell together in unity. This unity is a very important factor. Dwelling together is a very important factor. Goodness and pleasantness are a factor. How are we doing with regard to the baseline? So welcome to the Kingdom Baseline Benchmark. Right here at Mount Sinai in the time of Parsha Naso. Welcome to the baseline. Welcome to the benchmark. That is the baseline line and benchmark to which we are always to aspire, and the maintenance of which we are always to value and prioritize, and do so over any personal or familial or tribal or ethnic or other agenda of any kind. Can we hold on to this baseline? Can we return to the baseline? Maybe the better way of thinking it right now, based on where I know most of us have been. I see your social media. I see that there's a lack of this baseline that's not been met. Can we return to the baseline? Once we return to the baseline, can we hold on to the baseline? Can we perchance even build upon it as Yeshua, Messiah, as disciples of Yeshua, Messiah? Can we begin to build upon that in ways that are according to the plan, the build-out plan that came with the structural, architectural drawing, the blueprint, which is the Torah? Can we build upon the baseline? Consider the testimony of Joseph and his brothers as we get ready to go out in the wilderness and the desert. Remember that after the great reconciliation sequence described in Genesis 45, when Joseph, as he's known in the Western world, and his brothers who had hated him and accused him and sold him into slavery, after the great reconciliation sequence that was described in Genesis 45, Joseph saw his brothers off on their journey back to their father's house to tell them that Joseph was alive, the good news that there was placed, they could come and escape the famine and come and be provided for in Joseph's house. And so as he was sending them back with the good news, he gently admonished them these words: Al tirgezu ba'dereka. Al tirgezu ba'dereka. See that you do not fall out along the way. See that you do not become troubled or lose your shalom or get shaken, distracted, fearful, angry, worried, and lose your unity and lose your resolve for the mission along the way. Al tirgezu ba'dereka. Okay, beloved, this is the message as we sit here getting ready to go into our own wilderness. As in our day and time, we get ready to go into the tribulation periods, the times of intense struggling and anti-Messiah rising and all the things that will be happening around us. The one world order forcing its will upon as many as it can. The lies being told by the institutions and the governments of the world and the media of the world. As this begins to intensify, here's the question: will you fall out along the way? Will you become troubled and shaken by what's going on? Will you get distracted? Will you be fearful, worried, angry, anxious? Will you lose your unity? Will you lose your sense of belonging to a great mission and a purpose? Will you lose your resolve to see that mission carried out? Will you lose yourself? Will you fall out along the way? What we have in Parsha Naso is a primer on how not to sabotage the operation of the grand plan. The Holy One has this grand plan of redemption and restoration, and he wants to bring it to bear on your lifetime and generation. And within all your spheres of influence, he has this plan. He wants to bring it to bear in all your spheres of influence in your lifetime, in your generation. But you could sabotage it, and you will sabotage it if you're not prepared for what's about to face you in the wilderness. So he gives us this primer, and he gives us instructions for dealing with what the Holy One considers the greatest challenges. And I'm going to list 8 of them. 8 challenges that are the most important. As the father would tell his children before they goes out into their first challenge with the world, here are 8 things to look out for. Here are 8 things not to let happen to you, because if you do, then your interaction with the world will come out for naught and for negativity as opposed to for constructive purposes, either in you or in regard to the world. His instructions for dealing with what he considers the greatest challenges to the Adam Hadash Echad, the one new man baseline. Hallelujah, one new man, Adam Hadash Echad, the one new man baseline. How do we lose it? How do we fail? Well, this is the test. Has being redeemed from bondage and persecution and oppression changed us for the good? Has meeting with him in his courts and being told our purpose on earth vis-a-vis all things helped us and made us more life-giving, light-bearing people? has his plan being told his plan and being taught his ways and his rules of engagement with brother and neighbor and strangers of all levels and widow and orphan and the poor and the rich and even our enemies, has being taught these things, these ways and these rules of engagement made us more beneficial to the world, helpful to the world, or has it made us angry? Has it made us self-righteous? Has being shown around his beauty realm, the courts of the king, the holy places of the king, as being shown around there and being introduced to as friend in that realm, as a courtier in that realm, has that made us more accessible and more giving to the world, or has it made us something else? Has having his presence with us constantly at the Mishkan, constantly available to have communion with him, has that changed us in a positive way? Are we ready to be part of the solution now to the fallen condition of mankind and created order? Are we ready to be part of the solution for those things, or are we still content to remain part of the problem? You see, every day, beloved, we have to make some choices. We have to choose as to what kind of impact and influence we will have upon the world around us. And these are the things we have to choose between. We have to choose between self-control and unbridled emotion. That's an important choice. Self-control or unbridled emotion. The world around you wants you to fall under the unbridled emotion. They can control you when you're unbridled in your emotions, when you're angry and you're outraged and you're worried and you're fearful. They can control you then. But if you're under self-control, then the Holy One can control you. The second thing we have to choose between every day, not just self-control and unbridled emotion, we have to choose between mission, that which is forwarding and furthering the mission, the plan, or that which is a distraction, taking us away from the mission and plan, a detour. We have to choose between divine instruction, the things that the shemaiah, the voice of the Holy One, and what he's actually said to do, versus human pseudo-intelligence, institutional knowledge, what the politicians and the celebrities and the media calls truth. Those things are not divine instruction. And divine instruction, we have to choose whether we're going to pursue and prioritize divine instruction or human pseudo-intelligence. Theologies, the studies, the teachings of the world. We have to decide whether we're going to choose. We're going to make choices between love and hate, between faith and fear, between forgiveness and offense. We have to choose between those. We have to choose between hope and despair. We have to choose between patient forbearance, trusting the Holy One, and knee-jerk reaction, which says we've got to do something about this right now because we have to control it. We have to choose between words and actions that have the capacity to heal the wounds in ourselves and others, and between those and the words and actions which will cause or exacerbate wounds in such people. But here's the thing about the baseline, staying with the baseline, is that each choice we make in these regards is going to carry repercussions. It's going to send out shockwaves throughout the world, in our families, in the people, amongst the people we love, amongst the people that are in our marketplace, in our workplace, in our neighborhoods. What we do with these choices, how we make these choices, will send out shockwaves for good or for harm. The first great challenge, I'm going to give you these 8 challenges and we'll be done for this morning. I'll commend this parsha to you for further study. But the first great challenge to the Sinaitic Edam Chadash Echad, one new man baseline, is found in Numbers Bamidbar 5, verse 2 and section A. The Holy One says, before we leave Sinai, before we head off into the wilderness, he says, send out of the camp Kol Hatsaura, all that spew or spray anti-holiness, anti-kedusha. Now, it doesn't say Metzarim. Most people in the English Bibles will read, send out all the lepers, all who have leprosy. That's not what it says in the Hebrew. It doesn't say send out Kol Metzarim, Kol HaMetzarim. It says Kol HaZaura, those who are not, with their classifications, Metzarim, or as lepers, as we want to think of them, is not what's the issue. The issue is, what are they releasing into the world? So send out of the camp. Don't tolerate within your camp those who are spewing, spraying around them anti-Kedusha, the opposite of the holiness and the goodness and the ways of God, the below baseline stuff. Now, I'll tell you what this looks like. Yeshua taught it to his disciples in Matthew 15, verses 19 through 28. He said, out of the heart proceed, and here's what the anti-Kedusha looks like. The Za'ura that is supposed to not be in our camp looks like. Evil thoughts of self-interest would be what that means. Murders, or adulteries. Now, he defined murder as anger and different things and speaking ill of your brother. And adulteries, which he defined as lusting after any person or after their body. Fornications, thefts, false witness, blasphemies. These are the things which defile a man. These are the Za'urah. The Za'urot, the plural of that. These are those things. Do you understand? Evil thoughts, those thoughts that are self-motivated, self-promoting. Murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, false witness, blasphemies. These are the things which defile a man. Now understand, the first important things that will get you out there if you let yourself get caught up, get sprayed, you get slimed by the people around you spewing anti-Kedusha. Be careful of this. This is what I would tell my children. Don't listen, don't get caught up in conversations. Don't get caught up in interactions and movements where they're spewing negativity. Evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, false witnesses, and blasphemies, because these things will defile you. So what is it that causes a man to absorb or emit? Why would a person, a man, woman, a child, desire, indulge anti-Kedusha instead of the holiness, the energy of heaven? Why would we emit and receive and absorb the anti-Kedusha instead, the things of this world? Well, here's the warning. You become like those you spend the most time with. I'll repeat that. You become like those you spend the most time with. You subconsciously mirror their body language, and especially you mirror their attitude. If they're sarcastic, you become sarcastic. If they're cynical, you become cynical. If they're irreverent, you become irreverent. You become like those you spend the most time with. You subconsciously mirror both their body language and their attitude. You catch and then begin to flow in their mood and their attitude. You even adopt their vocabulary, the words and phrases that they like to use. You repeat their bullet points. You finish their sentences. More than that, you begin to say the sentences for them, even when they're not there, because you are thinking their thoughts and doing. This is what happens, is how the poison of anti-Kedusha, uncleanness, hits the camp. So warning, warning, warning. First challenge will be, you will be caught up with sprayed anti-Kedusha uncleanness in these forms. The second great challenge of the 8 that the Holy One mentions in Parsha Naso and deals with is that to send out of the camp, in Numbers 2b, the second part of this is v'kol zah. Constructive energy into the world. Anti-Tahora, I call the other anti-Kedusha. This is anti-Tahora. It's that which it comes out of the flesh. When people's flesh begin to operate and you begin to deal with them according to the flesh, and you begin to then live according to the flesh stuff that leaks, the leaky flowing flows of flesh. 1 Thessalonians 4, 3 through 8, Shaul said, this is the will of God. I wanted to tell you, this is the baseline. This is the will of God, your cleanness, your holiness, your purity, your tahora. And know that you are to abstain from zana, Greek porneia, that which each of you should know how to possess your own flesh, your own basar, your own vessel, in kedusha, in holiness, and in honor, in beauty, not in passion of lust like the goyim who do not know God. You see, this is the contamination that you get when you are around someone who is leaking the flesh stuff into your world. So we are not to be like the goyim who do not know God, and no one should take advantage of his brother or defraud his brother in this matter. You see, it's not just you that's bearing the consequences. You're causing this to spread throughout your community. For God did not call us to tumah, Shaul said. He did not call us to uncleanness, but he called us to kedusha, to holiness. The third great challenge to the Sinaitic baseline is the third part of Numbers 5:2. He said, "Send out of the camp v'kol tameh lanafesh." That in English, a lot of times your King James is going to tell you it's become unclean because of contact with a dead body. That's not what it says in the Hebrew. It doesn't say met, which would be a dead body, a mut. It doesn't say anything about death. It's that you become contaminated. A person who's been contaminated, unclean, bearing deconstructive energy by virtue of someone who's living. Lanafesh, the someone who has a breathing. Dead people don't breathe. Dead bodies don't breathe. So instead what he's talking about here is those who have absorbed the uncleanness, the destructive, deconstructive energy and effect of other human beings. You've caught it, and it's now spreading through you. Send out of the camp those. Example, Mark 16:11, Matthew 16:11, Mark 8:15. Yeshua talking, charging his disciples. He says, "Take heed, beware." The way he put it is, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, it says in Matthew. And the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the leaven of Herod or the Herodians. Now, you connect with these people, you begin to find the worst parts of them and reproduce the worst parts of them. There were Pharisees who were people who were hungry for the Holy One and wanted to do his will. But there was also a negative energy that came with their associations with each other. Same with the Sadducees. There were Sadducees who wished to fulfill the will of the Torah, the way the Torah had said. However, and when they got together, they started talking, they started interacting with one another, they started mirroring one another's negativity, and instead of doing the things that they wanted to do, they did that which they did not want to do. And finally, there was the leaven of Herod, the Herodians, those who are tied in with the government, with the political realm and the political world, who want to fight over all these hotbed issues. Okay, you see that. The fourth challenge of the Sinaitic Adam Hadash Akkad baseline is found in Numbers 5 through 10. It's whenever the Holy One says, he gives his own words, he says that you are, if a man has breached the covenant, breached a responsibility to another person, titadu, he is to acknowledge. King James Version says confess the sin. This is not an apology, as it were. This is a acknowledgement that he's not righteous. He's not. This is where you get into situations of who's to blame. We don't do that. We don't play the blame game. It's not a matter. What other people did is not our problem. What we did is our problem. So you are to acknowledge. The person who has breached the covenant is to acknowledge the breach of covenant itself and the unresolved damage, injury, offense that has flowed from that breach of covenant. It's not just the breach of covenant itself, the sin, as the Western world likes to call it. It is not just that, it's what the sin does. The breach of covenant has caused damage, injury, offense to other people, to our families, to our atmosphere in the earth. So the first thing that we want you to know, tool he wants to give us is titadu. Learn how to acknowledge. Get back in the presence of the Holy One. Let him convict you of what you've done, and then to begin to acknowledge it. Hata'at. And then the second thing there, the other tool is veheshiv, to make teshuvah, to make a return. I think in English it says to make restitution. And I understand why it says that, and it's not that it's not restitution, but it's bigger than restitution. It is turning back. It's going back to your baseline, going back to the place and to the one that is the source of your baseline, the creator of the universe and his Torah. So he is to make shuv, to make teshuvah for his Hashem. And then, of course, the restitution part, or the extra compensation, is a 20% interest penalty that's paid. So this is unconfessed breaches of covenant, unacknowledged breaches of covenant on our own part, and unresolved damage and injury and offense. That is a great challenge to the baseline of the one new man. Don't let breaches of covenant in your own life go unacknowledged. Examine your heart regularly with the Holy One. Because if you let them go unconfessed, this is kind of like the Joseph story. They went unconfessed. They were not, the brothers would never confess and never acknowledge that they had done what they had done to Joseph. And they wouldn't even acknowledge it to their father, the one who had hurt the most. And there was so much unresolved damage, injury, and offense from that. That's our model that we look at. So if you want to know how to sabotage, just don't acknowledge your own breaches of covenant. And don't go forth and try to resolve the injuries and damages that you've caused. The fifth great challenge to the Sinaitic Adam Hadash Akkad, one new man baseline, is found in Numbers 5:11 and following. That is what's in English called the protocols of the jealous husband or the unfaithful wife. Protocols of the Sotah in Hebrew. It's called Sotah in Hebrew. And what this is all about is, if you want to know what the challenge to the Sinaitic baseline is, it is marriage done badly. Husband and wife relationships done poorly, done dishonorably. See, because as go our marriages, the Holy One has defined it this way. Shaul explained this in the book of Ephesians. As go our marriages, so goes the kingdom. As goes your marriage, husband and wife, as goes your marriage, so goes the ability of the kingdom to work through you. This is more important. This is why you be careful entering into marriage. And you're very jealous and zealous about how you build that marriage, build that relationship, build that interaction in such a way that it honors the king. Because as go your marriages, so goes the kingdom. So there's two threats that are involved here in this Sotah portion, discussion of the Sotah. I know we could get into the details of what you're supposed to do in this strange, interesting formula for how to resolve this. The Holy One's giving that, I think, with tongue in cheek. Because he doesn't believe anybody in their right mind would ever do this. No husband with any level of respect at all for his bride or his family would go through this protocol. But let's say the two issues are, instead of dealing with the details of what that is, the two issues are infidelity. The first issue is infidelity. The threat, the worry of it, infidelity. The husband should never have to worry about fidelity. Now, I'm not saying that he's perfect or she's perfect. We're not getting into issues of who's right and who's wrong. The issue is infidelity should never be a fear. It should never be a worry. Why? Because we are supposed to be continually building echad basar, one flesh. Husband and wife, this is the calling. This is why you don't enter into it lightly. You don't enter into it because you're emotionally caught up in a relationship or you're full of lust or any of those things. You enter in it because you're willing to submit yourself, surrender yourself day by day, moment by moment, situation by situation to becoming one flesh. To cease to be two and become one. That is the essence of biblical marriage. And the idea of why the covenant needs this is the example we're supposed to show to the world. We're not supposed to have marriages like they have marriages. Our marriages are supposed to be continually about becoming one flesh. And they shall become one flesh, he said. Now, that means that we are to make, on both sides of the equation, make sure there's no emotional estrangement or separation. That's the first one. No emotional estrangement or separation. We should know, you should know if you're losing that loving feeling, that sense of emotion. Early on, before we get to the level of worry about fidelity, you could tell. Make sure your spouse knows you are emotionally caught up with them and one with them. Secondly, infidelity involves rebelling against the one flesh calling by attraction and romance, estrangement or separation. In other words, you're willing now to turn your attention, your attraction toward another person, as opposed to focusing on. Does your spouse know your attraction to them and is your exclusive attraction to them? Does your spouse know the only romance you want is with him or her? This is a critical factor. We are to have this. No conversational estrangement. Don't quit talking to one another. Find ways. Work at it if you have to. Find things to talk about and talk responsibly and honorably without lashon hara, without all the negativity that we've been talking about earlier. Conversational, oneness, build it, have it grow. Relational estrangement. We don't want any relational, if that's what infidelity means, it's not just about the act of sexual infidelity. It is about all levels of the infidelity where you're breaking the oneness connection. The mission task Are you on the same, are you working together in the mission or task? Or you just let that person do their thing and this person do? Are you both parties committed to work? This is what marriage is in the kingdom. Not about a convenient social convention where you can get together and get certain benefits from the government. This is about learning to become one flesh. That involves mission and task unity. And then, of course, no ever sexual estrangement or separation. Now, the second thing is not just infidelity, it's the jealousy. There's two factors involved that cause the marriages to go south, to be done dishonorably. That would dishonor the kingdom. And the second one is jealousy, to allow things to simmer. Now, here's the interesting thing. Nowhere in this does the Holy One say, because this is sort of endemic, should be natural, ask her. Did she do this? Have a conversation about it. That is sort of implied that needs to happen first. And if it's not, and therefore jealousy should be dealt with before it gets deep and before it gets angry and before it gets to the level where you would ever consider the possibility of going through this process. All right. And then the third thing is the acknowledgement of the possibility of teshuvah, of change, of turn. I will go, the next one is the protocols of the Nazir. We're going to have to finish up here about out of time. But the protocols of the Nazir are Numbers 6, verse 1 and following. This is what happens. One of the things that will threaten the unity of the camp, the baseline, the benchmark, is unsurrendered and unbridled zeal. I know this may not be the way you've ever looked at the protocols of the Nazarite. But here's the reality of the matter. The Holy One has given us, through the Torah, enough to keep us busy. He's given us all the things that for all of our lives, we don't need to go outside the realm of the Torah. We can never even get halfway into the depth of how all the Torah is. So we should never be looking for ways beyond the Torah to somehow serve Him if we think we are, be spiritual or whatever. There's plenty of ways, more than enough ways in the Torah. So if we have this, if we have unsurrendered, we have zeal beyond the Torah, beyond His instructions, that means we are not living by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. We're trying to live by some unbridled zeal within us, the thrill, the desire to be something super spiritual. It's really a form of self-absorption, you understand, and voyeurism in the world. It's the same thing that led Nadab and Abihu, I believe, to do what they did. It's the same thing that led to the Pharisaic and Sadducean hypocrisies that Yeshua talked about. It's the same thing that led the rich young ruler to say, I've done all these things all my life. What more can I do to be saved? To inherit eternal life. You see, there's this whole process of wanting something more. People do this with extreme fasting as a discipline. Fasting is never supposed to be a discipline. It's supposed to be a mitzvah. When the Holy One has told you to fast, and His Word is very clear on when that is, then you fast. But the fasting is not done to make you super spiritual. It's not done to set you apart from other people. It is done because it is, if it's done at all, because the Holy One told you to do it. The words of the living God, not your own desires to do something super special. And the other thing about the problems of the unsurrendered, unbridled zeal is that this kind of zeal is usually not based upon service of the fellow man. It's usually not based upon service of fellow man. That's why it's wrong. That's why it's problematic, because it doesn't serve any purpose other than to make you feel more spiritual. I know this is hard to hear, but this is the reality. Is the Holy One knows that unbridled, unsurrendered zeal is not going to serve the purpose of the kingdom. It's going to serve your own self-interest. So He provides a channel. He says, this zeal, I can't stop it from happening, but if it comes up, I want to channel it in certain specified ways and make it temporary. Nazarite vow was a temporary phenomenon, and it was over, hopefully within 30 days or a short period of time. And He brought you back at the end of it to the Mishkan, back to what was really important, back to the altar, back to the place of self-sacrifice and surrender to the will and the ways and re-entering the things of the world. All right. I'm just going to get to the seventh one, basically the protocols of blessing. Look, folks, if we ever get away from the blessing, this is the priestly blessing, the Aaronic blessing as it's called, Numbers 6:22 and following. We are called to be a blessing to every family on the face of the earth. We should be so familiar with the terms of the blessing, the impact of the blessing, the mood of the blessing, the sweetness of the blessing, the holiness of the blessing. Just listen to the Aaronic blessing. Read it. Understand what he's talking about, the name and the character and the attributes of the Holy One, his presence, his countenance being upon you, and the shalom that he comes forth. This is what we should be very familiar with. So he gives us this seventh. He said the seventh challenge will be to lose contact with the blessing. Out of the same mouth should not proceed both blessing and cursing. We are here to bless. We are here to receive and then to give blessing. That is our purpose. That is our mission. My children, before you go off into the wilderness, are you prepared? Are you ready? Do you understand the baseline? And are you prepared to walk according to it? Shabbat Shalom. We'll see you next week.